This bed rolls. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen. This is my booktube. And shocker, today we're actually going to be talking about books. Today's going to be all about the books that I read in May. So in general, May was a pretty busy month for me. And towards the end of the month, I was traveling. So, as you may have noticed, this video is a week later than I normally would post it, and that is because I did not have time to sit down, record, edit, and upload a May wrap-up in all of the chaos that was the end of May. So, we're going to be doing that today. As you may have noticed, this is a different setup. I'm currently in London, and you will be seeing plenty of videos about London and my time here in the coming weeks. But jet lag has me up at 6 a.m, so I figured I may as well put on a face of makeup, sit down, and finally film this May wrap-up video. Apparently I forgot to mark the last two books that I read in May as finished, so let me go ahead and do that real quick so that I can get an accurate stat update for you. Okay, now that I have that updated, let's go ahead and go through the stats of the books that I read in May. So I finished 5 books in the month of May. I read 269 pages and listened to 40.5 hours worth of audiobooks. We have a little bit of a different breakdown for the genres and things for this month because the book club pick for my work book club was a literary novel. We stepped away from the thrillers a little bit this month. So always good to have a little bit of something different sprinkled in my reading mix. So this month in my moods of the books that I read, we have, you know, the standards, the staples on this channel. We have mysterious, tense, and dark. That is the majority of the books that I like to read. But then we also have hopeful, which is nice. It's nice to have a hopeful book every now and then. And then we also have emotional. As far as the pace of the books, 60% of the books that I read were medium paced and 40% were fast paced. I only finished 1 physical book this month and it was 269 pages like I already mentioned. The length of the audiobooks that I listened to were between 8 hours and 15 hours and 59 minutes. And surprise, surprise, I only read fiction books this month. If you're new around here, that is a staple on this channel as well. We are here for escapism. We don't really read many, non-fiction books here. For the genre breakdown, I had 4 books counted as mysteries, 4 counted as thrillers, 1 was speculative fiction, 1 was counted as LGBTQIA+, and 1 was literary. So again, we have a little bit of a different mix this month because of the 1 book that I read for a book club. This month I read 80% audiobooks and 20% physical books. Like I said, I had that 1 physical book at the beginning of the month, and then the rest of the month I listened to audiobooks. And then on average, I rated the books that I read this month 3.55 stars. The lowest rated book was 2.75 and the highest one was 4 stars. As per usual, we'll go ahead and start on the lower end and work our way up to the higher end of the books this month. So let's go ahead and get into that. In the 2.75 category, we have Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. If I remember right, I think I may have included this in some sort of like reading vlog of sorts, but this was my least favorite Megan Miranda book. It was very forgettable in my opinion. I'm trying to even recollect what happened in this book. So Such a Quiet Place takes place in a New England college town that is on a lake where a year or so prior there was a tragedy that took place where a married couple lost their lives due to carbon monoxide poisoning. They were found in their home with their car running in the garage and they were asleep in bed and they passed away. And when that happened, the main suspect was a young girl named Ruby who was living with our main character. I don't even remember the main character's name. Harper. Okay, her name is Harper. So Ruby was living with Harper when this happened. Ruby was a young girl, I think she was in her early 20s or so, and she would walk dogs around the neighborhood. So the Truitt family that passed away was one of the families that she would frequent in her dog walking. So she had a key to the home and the police focused in on her very quickly, brought her to trial, convicted her, and put her in prison. Then 14 months after the incident, Ruby is released from prison and returns back to Harper's home in Hollow's Edge. That is a lot of H. That is an alliteration. Oh my gosh. Harper's home in Hollow's Edge. My goodness. Anyways, so she returns to Harper's house, and this puts everyone in this neighborhood on edge. And they all become highly suspicious of Ruby and her motives with coming back to the scene of the crime, if you will. And she essentially revels in making everyone feel uncomfortable. She had protested her innocence the entire time, and people in the neighborhood had testified against her, so it makes sense that people would be afraid of her. The ones that testified against her clearly believed that she was someone who would murder people. And now she's out of prison and living in their neighborhood. So they're right in being scared, in my opinion. Then at a 4th of July pool party, Ruby is present, she is drinking, and then her body is found next to the pool late at night by the neighborhood watch. And she had been poisoned. So now we have technically a third death. And Harper goes on a mission to not only unravel what Ruby's motive was in all of the weird interactions that she had since she, I almost said escaped, since she was released from prison, in order to try and figure out who murdered Ruby. I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil it because honestly, you don't need to read it. It's very much white people being paranoid in their idyllic little northeastern town. Like, all of these people live in this well-to-do neighborhood in this little like New England college town, and like they all work at the university. They're all so interconnected. They have a little Facebook group about their neighborhood. They have a neighborhood watch. They have, you know, the head Karen who like makes passive aggressive posts and stuff. It's just, I didn't like any of these people in the book. Even the main character Harper, who is supposedly supposed to be the likable one, I didn't really care for. She was very like naive, and it took her a very long time to put together the end solution, in my opinion. And the ending was just so anticlimactic because the big reveal is that no one killed the Truitts, that it was somehow an accident, which I still don't understand. How you leave your car running with the big garage door shut, but the door to the house open, and then just go to bed while carbon monoxide is filling your house. And also conveniently, your carbon monoxide detector is not working, so you don't even have a carbon monoxide detector in your house. It's just, it just feels lazy to me. I didn't like it. And then the reveal that Ruby didn't actually kill them obviously came after Ruby was murdered. The subsequent big reveal is who murdered Ruby, and it's just, I just didn't like it. Like, I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't really care for the story. I didn't care what was going on in this stupid neighborhood. And it just didn't do anything for me. It was more of a chore than anything to finish it. I believe there were some parts that I was like, oh, okay, that's cool, I guess. I guess what I'm trying to say is it wasn't written poorly. I just did not like the story. I didn't like the storyline at all. Megan Miranda seems to like to focus on privileged people. And I think at least two of the 3 books that I've read, if not all 3, because they're all so forgettable, I don't really remember a lot of what happens in them. But at least 2 of the 3 that I've read all have to do with wealthy people in the Northeast, and I just could not care less about their problems. I think this is the final nail in the Megan Miranda coffin for me. I don't think I'll be reading any more of her books anytime soon. Not really great to end on my least favorite one of hers that I've read, but I'm done. I don't really feel like putting myself through another one, having to suffer through another one just to try to find a book of hers that I like. So yeah. We're ending our Megan Miranda journey with Such a Quiet Place. And this had like good reviews too, and I don't understand why. I know Reese Witherspoon's like big on book clubs and stuff. I see her little stickers on a bunch of books that I read. And I've read another one that was part of the Reese Witherspoon book club this month, and it was good. So like, I don't understand why there are some people that really like Megan Miranda's books. They're not special to me. And seemingly a lot of them are just about rich people problems that like I can't relate to, so maybe that's why I don't like them. But I digress. I've already been talking 20 minutes about the first book, so we should probably move on. So the next book that I have is jumping quite a bit in the star ranking. This book I rated 3.5 stars, and that was Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. I've read 2 other Alice Feeney books before. I have read Daisy Darker and I have read Rock, Paper, Scissors. Both of those really solid thrillers. If you want a good thriller, go for Alice Feeney. Don't go for Megan Miranda. I don't know what people see in Megan Miranda, but Alice Feeney does thrillers pretty well, in my opinion. This one was my least favorite of the 3 Alice Feeney books that I have read, but even so, I still thought it was a good thriller. I still liked it a lot. I really put this book in context with the other ones of hers that I had read, and for me, the tier list is Sometimes I Lie, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and Daisy Darker. So my favorite of them, obviously, is Daisy Darker. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, I could literally look it up right now, but I really don't feel like it. But I believe that Sometimes I Lie is the earliest of the 3, then it was Rock, Paper, Scissors, and then it was Daisy Darker. So it kind of makes sense as she progresses as a writer that her books get better. So with that trajectory, I'm excited for any other books that Alice Feeney comes out with in the future, and I would read other ones that she's written too. So when I was looking for books to put on my TBR in May, I was really drawn in by the premise of this book. It was so different from any other thrillers that I had read before, and the whole concept I got just from the summary was very interesting. So I always forget the main characters' names. That's what happens when you read 60 books in a year. I can't keep these names straight. There are a lot of leading women in these thrillers, and I cannot keep their names straight to save my life. Amber. Okay, her name is Amber. So Sometimes I Lie centers around Amber. So right from the start of the book, she is in a coma. And though she is in a coma, she is cognitively there. She hears everything going on around her, all of the nurses coming in and out, all of the doctors, her family, all of that. So she is aware of everything that's happening, but she cannot open her eyes, communicate in any sort of way, which sounds horrifying, honestly. One of my biggest fears, to be fair. Though she is able to hear and think and put pieces together, she does not remember how she ended up in the hospital. She has flashes of things that she's not sure if they're memories or dreams, but she cannot put together how she ended up in this hospital bed. And so we have this dual perspective of days leading up to the accident, and then we jump forward to Amber in a coma. While she is slowly remembering what happened to her and putting together what happened to her and how she ended up in this hospital. Immediately right off the bat, she is suspicious of her husband. She thinks that her husband doesn't love her anymore, and she vaguely remembers them having an argument and thinks that that is what caused the accident. My battery died. So this one, because I did enjoy it and I do recommend Alice Feeney books, I'm not going to spoil the twists and things. Also, this is one of the first books that I read this month, and I don't remember all of the details. I remember the major like plot points and twists and things, but some of the lesser details about how they connect, I don't really remember all that well. But we are essentially following along with Amber as she slowly regains her memories. Then once she does recover those memories, we get the horrifying scene of her desperately trying to get herself to come out of the coma so that she can tell people what happened to her. Then we are brought along as Amber is essentially defenseless in her, I almost said hotel room, in her hospital room, while she has the full knowledge of what happened to her and who did this to her and cannot tell anyone. She does eventually come out of the coma, and that is like the big conflict of the book. But yeah, I don't want to give anything else away because if you're into thrillers, I think that this is a pretty fun thriller to read. It also takes place at Christmas time, so if you're a thematic reader and you like to read books that take place around Christmas time at Christmas time, this may be a good one to add to your December TBR. It's not particularly Christmassy in any way, but it does take place between Christmas and New Year's, so that's something. But yeah, I rated this a 3.5. Like I said, it just wasn't quite as good as Rock, Paper, Scissors. That one really had my jaw hanging a little bit when the reveal came. In that one, I didn't put together the twist until it was actually happening. In this one, I did figure it out a little bit sooner. I will say I didn't completely figure it out right off the bat, but I definitely put it together sooner than I did in Rock, Paper, Scissors or in Daisy Darker. Next up, we have two books that I rated 3.75 stars, and the first one was the only physical book that I read this month, The Writing Retreat. The Writing Retreat is about, as you would expect, a writing retreat. Imagine that. So the Writing Retreat centers around Alex, who is selected at the very last minute to attend a writing retreat put on by her favorite author, Rosa. Rosa Vasquez? Her name starts with a V, I don't remember what it is, but Rosa nonetheless. So Alex packs up and heads to upstate New York to attend this month-long writing retreat with 4 other girls. One of them being her ex-best friend, and that's a whole other can of worms that I don't feel like getting into a lot of detail of the back and forth of their relationship. So Alex and Ren were best friends at one point in time. They hooked up, Ren got weird, stopped talking to Alex. Alex tried to confront her, accidentally pushed her down a small flight of stairs where she severely cut her hand and was worried that Ren would never write again. And this is like a big point of contingency between them as they're both at this writing retreat. And it's a plot point that like I was kind of like, can we move past this, please? There are bigger fish to fry here. This is a literal life and death situation. Y'all can talk about the time you hooked up 3 years ago after we escaped this murder mansion, okay? Maybe it's just me, but like that would be the last thing on my mind if I was in this situation. But nonetheless, Alex and Ren seem to think it is a very important thing to talk about in the moment, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So Alex goes to this writing retreat in upstate New York, and right off the bat, it's a little suspicious. It is a very remote and large mansion that was built in the 1800s by this millionaire industrialist or something and his wife, Daphne. So Daphne is a pretty central figure throughout the whole book. Her paintings are all over the walls, and she has her own spooky lore attached to her. That she was a spiritualist, that she could commune with the dead, and becomes the topic of Alex's novel that she's writing during this retreat. So everyone gets there, and Rosa tells them the rules of the writing retreat. You have to write so many words a day, your pages are due by midnight, then the next day we will review as a group and give critiques and whatnot. Wash, rinse, repeat. Do it all again. So that is the format of the writing retreat, and doesn't take very long before things start to go awry and our story really begins. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I gave it a 3.75. I did knock some points off because though the actual like thriller part of the story was very compelling and I did like binge read this book to a certain extent, there were other parts that I was just like, why is this even in the book? Most of my qualms with the book are characters that are not fully present in what's going on when, pardon my French, shit hits the fan. Because even once they're in like mortal danger, they're still like not fully focused on that. And like, maybe it's just the way my brain works, but I don't think that if I were in the same situation, I would really be in that mindset. I wouldn't be in the same mindset, you know? I would be pretty focused on escaping with my life if I were in that situation, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I just have more of a survival instinct than some of these other girls. I don't know, but nonetheless, that was a part that got on my nerves about this book for sure. And there were also other scenes that were explicitly sexual in nature that I don't think added to the story at all, so I don't really understand why they were included in the first place. It not only didn't add to the story, it was kind of distracting because it just added another layer of things that I needed to think about while I was reading this. And it just didn't feel like it fit. if that makes sense. So because of all of those qualms, I had to knock it down a bit. If it didn't have that extra stuff, it would be a solid 4.5 star book for me because, you know, the premise is great. This remote writing retreat, there's no cell phone reception, phone lines are down, it's covered in a sheet of snow, there's no way cars can get up there. It's like 10 miles to the next habited property, which is a nunnery. Like, the setup is really good for this kind of thriller story, but everything else that the author added in just kind of detracted from that. And I understand having those things early on before things start getting real creepy, but they were still happening like towards the end of the book, and it just kind of took away the focus in my opinion. So those are the reasons why I rated this book 3.75 stars instead of anything higher. I do still think that it was a good book. I enjoyed it a lot. It was just those bits that took me out of the story and made me want to rate it less than a 4 star. The next book I rated 3.75 stars was Remarkably Bright Creatures. So this was my oddball out book of the month, and that's because this was the book that my workbook club selected for the read this month. Remarkably Bright Creatures is a literary novel that centers around a 70-year-old woman named Tova and an octopus at an aquarium. They're the two main characters, and before you ask, yes, we do get the POV of the octopus. His name is Marcellus, and he talks like a stuffy English professor, so I would suggest listening to the audiobook because the guy who voiced Marcellus is pretty great in my opinion. So in the book, Tova works nights cleaning at her local aquarium, where she meets Marcellus the octopus. While she is cleaning one night, she notices behind a trash can that there is a small brownish lump that is tangled in a phone charging cable. And she realizes that it is the Great Pacific octopus that has escaped his enclosure. So she untangles him, puts him back in his enclosure, and he recovers and he regains his vibrant color and all of that stuff. After this incident, she starts checking in on Marcellus more, and they start to form a friendship of sorts. Marcellus is very appreciative of Tova coming to his rescue on one of his many escapades at night. He has his escapes down to a science. He knows exactly how to get out of his enclosure, and he knows how long he can last outside of his enclosure. And as long as he can make it back within like 18-ish minutes, he's fine. So he uses that to his advantage. He sneaks out a lot. He goes and he eats people's leftovers out of the fridge. He eats some sea cucumbers out of other exhibits. So he is essentially trying to make the best out of his captivity. One night, Tova is on a step stool at the aquarium and she falls and hurts her ankle, and she is out of commission cleaning at the aquarium for a few weeks. They then hire a replacement, Cameron, who is I would call him the secondary character of the story. He's kind of a main character, but the story really focuses, in my opinion, or maybe it's just because I like them more, on Tova and Marcellus's relationship. This book was super cute. I really enjoyed it, but the main reason that I rated it at 3.75 was because I just don't think it's that memorable. It was cute and it was sweet and it was hopeful and all of that stuff, and I did enjoy it, but it wasn't life-changing. It wasn't one that I see myself thinking about in 2 months' time when someone asks me for a book recommendation. Because of that, I rated it a little bit lower than a 4 star, but it was still really close to that 4 star feeling, but it was still really close to being a 4 star, so 3.75 was where I landed. This book really focuses on loneliness and friendship and reconnecting with family, finding yourself, and all of that stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, this was a really nice read in my opinion. Alrighty friends, we have made it to the final book in this May wrap up. The final book is the one that I rated 4 stars, and that is Wrong Place, Wrong Time. So once again, this thriller was one that really drew me in by the synopsis. The concept of the book was something that just was so unique, at least in the books that I've read. I haven't really read any other time looping thrillers before, so that whole premise was just fascinating to me. So Wrong Place, Wrong Time centers around Jen, who is in her 40s, happily married to her husband Kelly of 20 years, and they have a 18-year-old son named Todd. One night, Jen is up late waiting for Todd to return home from one of his teenage outings, and she sees him walking down the street. And when she sees him walking down the street, she also witnesses him murder someone. He pulls a knife out of his backpack and stabs this older man in the chest with the knife. She and her husband immediately run outside. They call paramedics. They try to talk to Todd, but he is in shock. He's not making sense, and she is just flabbergasted. Todd is not the type to do something like this. He is a brainiac, as she puts it. He is a very smart 18-year-old who has his whole life ahead of him and has a very bright future ahead of him, and she just cannot understand what could have happened to lead Todd to this point. Then, when Jen wakes up the next day, she has traveled back in time. It is now a couple days before, and she slowly starts to realize that she will continue traveling back in time until she figures out what caused Todd to murder this man. And I thought when I started reading this book that she would go back maybe like a month, 2 months. She went back 20 years throughout the course of this book. So the events that led up to Todd committing this murder are deep-seated in their family history, even long before Todd was even a glimmer in his father's eye, if you will. And so we follow along with Jen as she is continuously traveling back in time and reliving specific days in her life where she had missed certain context clues that eventually lead her to figure out exactly what is going on and why Todd commits the murder. This story was so good. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I thought that the time jumps were very well thought out. I really enjoyed seeing Jen relive these days, knowing what happens, and trying to rewrite history so that Todd never commits the murder. So this is a thriller, but I wouldn't say it's particularly thrilling in the like typical sense. It's more mysterious. It's more of a puzzle, I guess, in my mind. There aren't many instances where it's really like high tension, high anxiety kind of feeling where there's a big conflict, because the big conflict happens at the beginning of the book. And we are then trying to backtrack and figure out why this big event has happened. And it's really interesting to see how all of these little instances in Jen's daily life that she just brushes off and overlooks were actually important things that if she would have just looked a little closer, paid a little more attention, she could have seen the writing on the wall. Not necessarily to change it. There are just so many instances over the course of 20 years that she was just oblivious to. And it really makes you think about all of the little things that happen in your daily life that could be indicative of something deeper that we just brush off and don't think anything of. Not that I think that anyone in my life is involved in like a major crime ring or something like that, but it's just interesting to think about. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. The only reason I didn't rate it any higher is because it is missing that like key thrilling factor. Those moments that give me like the goosebumps and the chills and all of that stuff. It didn't have a lot of that, but it was still a really well written psychological thriller in my opinion. I really liked their little family a lot too. I really liked Jen and Todd and Kelly, and I just thought that they were a great little family. This is the only spoiler I will give, but they do get a happy ending of sorts. So love that for them. This was another book that was in the Reese Witherspoon book club, so I do enjoy some of the books that are in that, so maybe I should keep an eye out for those little stickers on books in the future and try them out. Though so was Such a Quiet Place, so I don't know how much I can trust that. So that is the end of my May wrap up. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of May. Leave a comment down below telling me what your favorite book that you've read recently was. It doesn't have to be in the month of May, just give me some book recommendations. I usually just end up scrolling around on Scribe or Goodreads or StoryGraph and looking for a synopsis or a cover that catches my eye, and that's how I make my TBRs. So it'd be nice to have recommendations from other people of books that they actually liked, rather than me just literally judging books by their covers. So if you have a favorite book that you would like to recommend me, leave it down below. I'll check it out and maybe add it to one of my future TBRs. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below. You should also subscribe while you're down there so that you can be notified when I upload new videos. This is mostly a book related channel, but I am traveling right now, so there will be some traveling content. There will also be at least a few London vlogs coming up in the future, so if you're into travel or if you just like London, you should also subscribe because I put out videos every Saturday around noon Central Standard Time. 6 p.m. British Standard Time, but that's how time zones work. I hope you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!